Hello, this is Kaii Marie, and you're listening to episode 4, season 1 of the Healing Element podcast. If you are watching the episode via the Healing Element podcast YouTube channel, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you are listening by audio, please be sure to download today's episode and subscribe to the Healing Element podcast. Today's episode, we are continuing our conversation regarding Dr. Joy DeGury's theory, post-traumatic slave syndrome. Today, we're talking about racial socialization and racist socialization. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Healing Element podcast, a weekly discussion giving you the tools to understand and heal from intergenerational trauma. I am your host, Kaii Marie. To find out more information about the topics discussed today, visit KaiiMarie.com. Hi guys, this is Kaii Marie here and welcome to the Healing Element podcast. So happy to have you. If you've been joining me for the last few weeks, you know that I've been talking about Dr. Joy DeGury's book, her theory, post-traumatic slave syndrome. If you have not checked that book out, I highly recommend it for anyone who is African American or if you work in an African American community. It's really important for us to understand historical trauma and how it impacts our communities, our families, etc., etc., etc. So today we're going to be talking about racist socialization. If you've been following, you know that I have a PowerPoint that I've been providing. If you are listening on the podcast, no worries. You can always go to the Healing Element podcast YouTube channel to check out the PowerPoint, if that's something you would like to do. All right, so we're gonna get right into it. I'm really bummed, guys, because there is this video that I wanted to share with you. It's the Nivea ad. You guys have probably heard about it. It came out a few years ago. Nivea had this body lotion, and it was promoting if you put this body lotion on yourself, that you would have fairer skin, which means lighter skin, closer to white, right? So there's this image of this African woman, she's putting this lotion on herself and she's saying how her skin is going back to its natural fairness. I don't even know what that means, but okay. And then she says, she goes out and she's like, I feel younger. It's like the world is her oyster now that she has lighter skin. And she, in the image, in the commercial, she goes, picks up her daughter. There's a gentleman there that sees her, and I guess he's like captivated by her beauty. And he's like, oh, you know, he recognizes her, and he's like, you must be here to pick up your sister. And she's like, no, my daughter. And her daughter, who is very light skinned, comes and runs into her arms. So all of this is showing us that if you're a woman, if you have a lighter complexion, first of all, your youth, right? You're going to look so much younger. This gentleman thought that she was there to pick up her daughter. So you have a more youthful appearance. She was so happy. This woman was like, her hair was flowing around. I mean, she was living her best life, right? And also you'll get the attention you want from men. All of that came from an ad. So what does that have to do with racist socialization? We're going to talk about it. And I will put the link to the video. As I said, you guys have probably already heard about this ad. I know that it was, when it started to kind of go around social media, it was a big thing because it was blatantly racist. And so, yeah, but anyways, when we start to have this conversation, and if you do decide to take a look at this video, you can kind of see how this type of messaging is portrayed in various type of programming that's on television, right? So even though this happened, it was pretty obvious with this Nivea commercial. A lot of these companies know, okay, you know, if we do have a certain message that we want out, we just have to find a way to do it so it's a little bit more subtle. All right, and then sometimes if you find yourself pointing things out, people are like, oh, you're just so sensitive. That's not really right, because then it gets kind of confusing, right? So if as a society, we don't want to change what it is, and we'll go into that, how we operate and how we move in society and the racism that exists, then we're going to do things to kind of keep that society as is and, you know, not do things to change it. We'll just kind of adjust so that we can, as I said, keep society how it is, but we can also put out those messages that do not benefit a certain type of group or a certain group. So again, I've been going through Dr. Joy DeGury's book. Hopefully you guys have found this helpful, not too academic, but there's some points in here that I think it's just better hearing from Dr. Joy DeGury. All right, so I'm on page 193. And again, we're talking about racist socialization. So this is a symptom. This is the third symptom that Dr. Joy DeGury provides to us. She says, we as African Americans are also affected by this racist socialization. Many of us behave as though we believe that white is somehow better than, and that we are deficient people, that white people say we are. This is one of the most insidious consequences of post-traumatic slave syndrome. At the same time, many of us also believe in the illusion of the American dream. Becoming clear about who we are as well as what is needed for our material and spiritual success is the foundation upon which our health depends. So our health depends on us being honest about the society in which we live. We need to tell our children the truth and prepare them to thrive in the real America. We need to replace America's racist socialization with racial socialization, and we are going to go into that. Because as I said, through this whole process, we've been talking about solutions. And I wanted to share with you a story in which how deep this goes, right? Like even growing up, you know, my mom from the South, grew up in South Carolina. And so there were certain things that were really programmed into her belief of beauty. And not only that, as far as how you looked, how that determined your level of success. I say that because growing up, I was a little bit lighter than I am now. I had pretty long hair. And my mom was really, of course, you want your daughter, if you're a mom, you want your daughter to have like nice, healthy hair. But she was really big on my skin complexion. And she would always say, you know, make sure that you put on your sunblock, not only for safety reasons, she's like, because you don't want to get dark. And sometimes, you know, sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. But she would say, okay, you're going to go outside, you're going to end up getting dark. Like it was like, so there was like this negative thing with my skin becoming darker. And I remember I had brought this up to an older woman. I was like, you know, I had, for years, I had like this complex. And she said, well, Kaii, did you ever think about it in your mom's era, that having that lighter skin meant that you had opportunity? Like her lighter skin meant that she had opportunities to jobs, maybe education. So lighter skin just wasn't a sign of beauty. It also helped you advance in society, right? How many stories have we heard of Black men and Black women who could pass, as they say, into white society, and they had a much better life than many of their other family members that could not pass. And they lived a life in which they were able to go on and become successful and just live in a totally different economic bracket than many of their family members who had darker skin or who could not pass. So not only was it just this standard of beauty, but there was a direct impact on your ability to provide and create a stable family as well. So this is layered here. It's not, again, it's not just about beauty, it's about how you are able to move in society. And what we have to do as African Americans, and I know sometimes the conversation of race is kind of like, oh my God, can we please talk about something else? I would love to talk about something else. But that's the reality that we live in, right? So what we have to do is be honest with ourselves so that way we can move forward and know, okay, so how do we move forward? How do we raise our kids in this type of society? It's extremely important. The last part here, when Dr. Joy DeGury says we need to tell the truth about America to our children, Guys, we have to stop saying, and I am not a parent. I think I said this in a previous video, so I'm not pretending like this is easy. But our children need to know the society in which we live. Saying, well, some people are good, some people are bad, some people, this can literally be life and death, right? If your son or your daughter, God forbid, comes face to face with a person who feels that, with a white person that feels that they should not be in their neighborhood, what are you gonna tell? You have to explain to them, listen, it's deeper than some people are good and some people are bad, or some people are nice to you, some people are friendly. It's deeper than that. This is about a societal structure. And we don't want our children growing up confused and internalizing this because we're not being honest with them about the society in which we live. Now, in addition to telling them about the honest truth about America, we can also talk about, in the midst of all that, how we as a people have thrived, right? So there is that part of it where we can say, listen, nothing was handed to us. We fought for everything that we have. And that's the type of fight and that's the type of strength that runs through your veins. But in saying that, you have to know the society in which we live. There's nothing wrong with saying that. We have to be honest with our children. And we have to be honest about the American dream, the pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I mean, you can look through our history and see how many times, and I don't believe African Americans ever had boots, but the many times that we've tried to pull ourselves up and create create communities, create businesses. How many times did these white vigilante groups come in and destroy what we built? Our children need to know the work that we put in to help us as a group progress and what happened to counter that movement. Pretending that it didn't happen or I don't really want to talk about it. First of all, your children are not going to have a sense of pride in what they are. And therefore, they're going to look to society, television, the television programming to tell them what they are. And that's one thing we don't want, right? We want them to get their sense of value from home. So they're going to be watching us, how we interact, how we speak, how we view ourselves. So that's going to make sure that we're held accountable and we are working or thriving to a certain type of standard. But we have to be honest about the society in which we live. We have to be honest with our kids about microaggressions. You know, you think about it, we as adults, we don't even like to talk about the many microaggressions that we deal with as African American people. How much more are our children not talking about it? Right? And so if we don't have these conversations with Dr. Joy DeGury, and I mentioned this in the previous episode, there's this underlying anger, right? This ever-present anger that exists when we're not being honest. When you hear like, oh, this country was built by the immigrants, or if you like those type of conversations, it kind of leaves out a whole group of people that were here. And that's not taking anything away from any other group. But when you hear things like that, you feel, right, as a group, that's telling you that you are not a part of American society and your group made no contributions. That's what's happening in a racist society. And this is part of that racial socialization that Dr. Joy DeGury is talking about. So what do we do about it, right? We're all about solutions on this podcast. So you want to talk about the issue and then also bring a solution. Dr. Joy DeGury says, what we need to do is have racial socialization. And what is racial socialization? It is the process whereby we come to know our strengths, understand the world in which we live, position ourselves to thrive. Continual education is at the heart of racial socialization. For young children, education is the elders' responsibility. For the adults, the responsibility is our own. We have to remain vigilant and questioning. We have to have a constantly endeavor to keep ourselves informed and our education current. We have to question the images as we see ourselves are portraying. We have to examine the sounds and pictures we expose ourselves to. We have to filter what we hear on the news and thrive to understand what is true. So that means that we have to do our part to hold others responsible. So we hold ourselves responsible for how we are portrayed. And also we can reject what we feel, okay, that doesn't do whatever is being right now on television or commercial, that's not true to what we are, what we represent. But how do you get the power and the understanding that what you're seeing is not a representation that you should accept? You get that through doing your own internal work. You get that through, as we talked about in earlier episodes, building that self-esteem, that self-worth, you coming up with the image of what you want to be. And not society just dictating you, okay, this is the box that you should fit in. What's the box that you want to fit in? Not even the box, how do you want to show up in the world? But we can only do that when we're honest about the society in which we live. And I love what Dr. Joy DeGury is talking about. She's talking about everybody has responsibility. Our elders, we need to hear your stories, elders. We need to know what you've gone through, what you went through, and it may be painful. So maybe it's time for therapy. But we have to be honest. Our generations are coming up, right? In which there was a Black president, and they're seeing some Black billionaires pop up. So they're getting this perception that, okay, because the problem is we're just not working hard enough. And so what we need to do is start to frame what our young people are seeing so that they understand how society works. So we have to share our stories, we have to share our experiences, we have to continue to learn and do the work so that we can provide helpful information to them so that they're able to thrive and not just survive in this society. And honestly, for years, we've just been, as a group, surviving barely. But we can change that. But to do that, we have to first do our own internal work. Another solution that Dr. Joy DeGury provides is telling the truth about the world. We spoke on that a little bit earlier. We have to be honest about this society. If you're looking at, if you're viewing this episode on YouTube, you'll see that right now I'm showing a picture on the PowerPoint in which there's 3 people that are holding up racism. They're holding up a sign that says racism is as American as baseball. Racism is in the fabric of this country. You think about how this country was even built. There were people that are already living here, and there was mass genocide to allow the establishment of this country. So are we having that conversation with our kids? Like, are we being honest about how the wealth of this country was built? Are we being honest about the fight that African Americans put in to just live? Because once you start to tell that story, first of all, our children and us, as we start to have that conversation with each other, with our babies, right? As we start to have that conversation, then we can say, oh, wow, like I do come from a strong people. Like I know a lot of people are always, like every time there's a movie that comes out about slavery, say, oh, here we go again. Because it can feel like, oh, like, look what we went through. Why did we put up with that? But what I would encourage you to do is start to own that story, right? So you came from people that should not be here right now. When you look at our history, shouldn't be here, but we're still here. And somehow there's still Black businesses, and somehow there's Black families. Now, are we the healthiest? No, but generational trauma will do that to you. But the fact that we're still here means that we can still make a change. It means that we as individuals can begin to do the work so that we can start to break these cycles, this generational trauma. We can start to do that ourselves. All is not lost. Now, I know that there's a much larger society out there that we have to contend with as well, but first we have to do the work within. And hopefully through this podcast that you'll be able to see that, yes, it is possible for you to begin to do the work. And once you start to do that work, then you can pass that on to your children, and then they'll know how to do the work. And they're not going to be out there searching, trying to figure out how, or at 30, 40 years old, like, okay, now I really get how this system works. You can start them at at a younger age. And so the question is, and I don't know if I mentioned this in previous episodes, but the question could be, well, when do I tell my children about, like, when do I have that conversation with them about race? Ooh, right? It's hard. It's a hard conversation to have. In my opinion, again, this is from the woman that doesn't have children. So some people may say, well, you have no business talking about it, but I'm going to talk about it. It could be, well, when they start asking questions. When you see them kind of say, I think my teacher's treating me differently. And then express, okay, well, why do you say that? If they see maybe something on television, anything that they're kind of telling you, or maybe even showing you, that they see that because of their skin color, they're being treated differently. Or they see people that look like them being treated differently because of their skin color. That is a perfect time to have a conversation. But in that, also talk about, yeah, babe, this is a society in which we live, but why don't we go through the history? It is painful, but there is this sense of resiliency that's within the African American community, that we keep pressing forward, we keep moving forward no matter what. So you can tell them the truth about the world, but also tell them how far we, meaning we as a group, African Americans, have come, and the fight that we've put in to be able to live in this country. That is something to be proud of. So please don't feel all is at loss. It just didn't end with slavery. We're still doing the work. People that are having conversations, whether it be on podcasts, YouTube channels, or just groups that are coming together to talk about trauma and healing, talking about intergenerational trauma, talking about historical trauma. These are all people that are doing the work because they know that our ancestors went through so much, and it's like they kind of pass us the baton, right? And say, okay, you guys push it forward. So that's what we want to do. We want to continue the work that our dear ancestors have done. And so to do that, I'm doing my part. And what's your part? We all have a part. Your part is to do your healing, continue to do your healing, and then share that with others. My part is to do my healing and share it with others. And as we start to work on ourselves, we're going to see how that then expands to our community. And it's a beautiful thing. And you can just think back like, wow, ancestors were doing you proud. Because when I know, right? You can imagine there's times they probably wanted to give up, but they kept going because they knew, like, for the next generation, I got to keep pushing through for the next generation. So that's what we're doing. That's the work that we're doing. How powerful is that? And I'm excited. I'm excited to be able to have this type of platform, to have this type of conversation, and to really take a look at our history as African Americans through a different lens of not just like, oh my God, we went through so much trauma, which we did and we still go through, but that it doesn't end there, that we can each as individuals do our work. So that way, when we get together as a collective, hey, who can stop that, right? When we get together as a collective, when we've gone through or started our healing journey, we can come together and really need to do some constructive work. So I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to so many conversations. And as I've been saying, looking forward to creating a space of healing and really having those hard conversations. I have a couple episodes that I have coming up and I'm like, I wonder how people are gonna take this. But it's about healing. And before you can begin your healing process, right, you have to have those hard conversations. You have to be like, okay, I'm just gonna strip away everything that I've tried to do to cover up hurt and pain to allow me to exist. And when you start lifting it up, because you're like, okay, I don't want to just exist, I want to live, it's not easy. But the important thing is for you to have a support system, that's what I'm working to create here on the Healing Element podcast, to know that you can get through this. And I am here to help you all along the way. So I hope that you found this episode helpful and important, again, to understanding how important it is for us to speak truth of the society in which we live, and how important it is for us to continue our healing journey. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Make sure you stay tuned next week for another episode. We are continuing the conversation about Dr. Joy DeGury's work post-traumatic slave syndrome. Thank you, guys. Oh, last but not least, make sure you go to kaimarie.com. That way you can find out more about my services. Also, make sure you sign up for the Journey to Healing newsletter. That's a bi-weekly newsletter in which I provide you tips how you can manage your stress. Okay, with that being said, you guys have a phenomenal, phenomenal day. Check in soon.